The pumping mechanism of the heart. Now, the heart is a special organ in that it has special muscles. The cardiac muscles are special in a number of ways. Now, first, structurally, the cardiac muscle is said to be striated. When viewed under the microscope, each muscle fiber or muscle cell, like this is one muscle cell, has a nucleus, and there appears to be lines or bands, dark and light bands that cut across the length of the muscle fiber. For that reason, the cardiac muscle is said to be striated. Now, when the heart is removed from the body of an animal and placed in a medium that contains the nutrients necessary for its functioning, it will continue to beat for several hours. Now, how is that? This is because the cardiac muscles are specialized in the sense that they initiate their own contractions. That is, the contractions originate from the muscle cells themselves. For this reason, the cardiac muscles are said to be myogenic. That is, their contractions originate from the organ itself. For a muscle to contract, there must be a wave of electric impulse. Now, the other muscles in the body are said to be neurogenic. Neurogenic, meaning that their contractions are initiated from the nervous system. But this is not the case for the cardiac muscles. The cardiac muscles are myogenic. They initiate their own contractions. Another special feature of the cardiac muscle is that it can contract and relax without fatigue. In fact, the moment the heart beats for the first time, in the embryonic stage of an animal, it will continue beating throughout the lifetime of that organism. Cardiac muscles relax, contract throughout one's life without fatigue. Another special feature is the presence of the interconnected fibers. Look at this muscle fiber branches, and these branches enable this line of muscle fibers to be connected to this other line of the muscle fiber. So throughout the wall of the heart, muscle fibers are interconnected, and this is important because it facilitates rapid spread of electrical impulse that brings about contraction. So these interconnections are very important because they help to spread rapidly the waves of contraction throughout the mass of the cardiac muscle. Another special feature are the intercalated discs. The intercalated discs consist of membranes that help to rapidly transmit the electrical impulse from one muscle cell to the next. This way, the spread of contraction is very fast from the point of origin to the rest of the cardiac muscle mass. So the cardiac muscle is highly specialized to function throughout. Even when it is not connected to the nervous system, it will still continue to function. Now, next to look at the contractions and relaxations of the cardiac muscles and how these help to bring about the pumping of blood through the circulatory system. Now, the heart undergoes contractions known as systole and relaxation known as diastole. When the ventricular muscles relax, like during diastole, these are the ventricles. So when the ventricular muscles relax, the volume inside will increase. That's the volume increases. Now, when the volume increases, the pressure decreases. At the same time, the cuspid valves, it is a bicuspid valves and the tricuspid valves, open to allow deoxygenated blood from the right atrium into the right ventricle, and also the oxygenated blood from the left atrium into the left ventricle. So during diastole, the ventricle's muscles relax, increasing the volume, thereby decreasing the pressure. This allows for the blood to flow into the ventricles. Now during this time, the atria walls slightly contract to help in the blood flow into the ventricles. So these walls here will slightly contract. Remember, they're not so muscular, they're not so thick, but the slight contraction is important because it helps in the pushing of the blood through the cuspid valves into the relaxed ventricles. So that is what happens during a diastole, relaxation of the ventricles. Now, during the systole, the ventricular muscles contract, and at the same time, the cuspid valves close. The cuspid valves close when the ventricular muscles contract. This will prevent the backflow of blood from the ventricles back into the atria. Remember, when the ventricles muscles contract, the volume decreases. And when the volume decreases, the pressure increases. It is that increase in pressure that pumps the blood from the ventricles and out of the heart. Now, during the systole, the cuspid valves close to prevent the backflow into the atria as the volume decreases or the pressure has increased. At the same time, the semilunar valves of the pulmonary artery and the semilunar valves of the aorta open. So during systole, and as a result of the contractions of the ventricular muscles, blood is pumped from the right ventricle through the pulmonary artery to the lungs for oxygenation. And at the same time, from the left ventricles, blood is pumped out through the aorta into the systemic circulation. If you look at the thickness of the left ventricle compared to that of the right ventricular wall, you see that the wall of the left ventricle is thicker. This generates high pressure, which forces blood to cover the longer distance over the systemic circulation. Whereas the right ventricle generates just enough power to pump the blood through the shorter systemic circulation. So that's why the difference in the thickness of the walls This one is thinner because it pumps blood over a relatively shorter pulmonary circulation, while this, the left ventricle, is thicker because it pumps the blood over the relatively longer systemic circulatory system. So during systole, the ventricle's walls contract to pump the blood out of the heart. A systole is always followed by the diastole, and the two make a complete heartbeat. So heartbeat begins with the diastole into the systole, then back to the diastole, or can also start from the systole, diastole, then back to the systole. So the moment the cycle is completed, then you have a heartbeat. Now, heartbeats can be felt as a pulse or pulsation by placing a finger on the large arteries in the body, like just around the wrist. You can feel the pulsation. Now, that pulsation is due to the pushing of the blood. As the blood is pumped through the arteries slightly expand. It is that expansion that is felt as a pulsation. So usually the heart contracts at an average of about 60, 70, 75 times per minute, depending on the age, temperature, activities, and other factors. So the pumping mechanism, you said, occurs alternately. We have rhythmical contraction and relaxation of the heart that occurs throughout an animal's life. Now, let us look at a little bit more about the heartbeat. He said, heartbeat is a pulsation, the throbbing action of the heart. And on average, there are about, say, 70 heartbeats per minute. Now, within the walls of the right atrium, there is a group of specialized cells that make up the sinoatrial node. The sinoatrial node serves as a pacemaker that regulates the pace at which the rest of the heart beats. This sinoatrial node generates the electrical impulses that brings about the contraction. It is one that initiates the contraction of the cardiac muscles. So, wave of electrical excitations or impulses originate from the sinoatrial node and spread over the atria. Once the electrical impulses are spread over the walls of the atria, the atrial muscle fibers contract. Then these electrical impulses then collect at another region. There is the junction between the ventricles and the atria, where there's another group of specialized muscle fibers known as the atrioventricular node. The atrioventricular node serves to collect the electrical impulses and boost them, then channels them down the interventricular septum. Along the interventricular septum, there is another group of modified cardiac muscles known as the Purkinje fibers. Now, the Purkinje fibers conduct the nerve impulses along the septum. So the nerve impulses move along the septum to the base of the heart, and then the Purkinje fibers also extend and spread upward like that. So, in this way, the electrical impulses are spread in a very coordinated manner to ensure that the contractions begin at the atria, then are channeled through the interventricular node and Purkinje tissues to the base of the ventricles, and then will spread up. This ensures that the auricles or the atria first contract to pump blood into the ventricles. Then the ventricles contract from the base upward, thereby pumping blood out from the right ventricle to the pulmonary artery, and from the left ventricle and into the aorta. So, the electrical impulses that are generated by the sinoatrial node are transmitted first over the atria, and then via the atrioventricular node and Purkinje fibers to the ventricles. This ensures a smooth, one-directional flow of blood. Now, even though the sinoatrial node does control the rate at which the heartbeat will take place, that's why it's known as the pacemaker. Even when the heart is removed from an organism, it will still continue to beat at its normal, natural rate. That is because the sinoatrial node is one that generates the electrical impulses. And in fact, it is the presence of the sinoatrial node and its function that makes the heart or the cardiac muscles to be myogenic. So their myogenic characteristic is due to the presence of the sinoatrial node, which is a group of specialized muscle cells that generate the nerve impulse responsible for contractions of the muscles. Now, however, the heart can still be controlled and influenced by the brain. As you are aware, under certain conditions, it's necessary to either speed up the rate of heartbeat or slow down. This is brought about by nervous stimulation of the heart. So innervation of the heart simply refers to the stimulation of the heart by nerves. The heartbeat can still be regulated by the brain. There is the vagus nerve and the sympathetic nerves that are connected to the sinoatrial node. The vagus nerve supplies impulses to the sinoatrial node, which serve to slow down the heartbeat. Like when one is asleep, the rate of heartbeat is slowed down, and this stimulation comes from the brain. On the other hand, when there is need to increase the heartbeat, like when one is engaged in vigorous physical activity, then impulses will be sent from the brain through the sympathetic nerve to the sinoatrial node, which then serves to increase the rate of the heartbeat. In this way, the circulatory system is able to adjust to the increased need for nutrients by the muscles and increased need to remove the metabolic waste that is produced at a faster rate during vigorous physical activity. Now, the rate of the heart can also be influenced by certain hormones such as adrenaline. Adrenaline can also speed up the rate of heartbeat. Normally, the adrenaline is produced under certain conditions, like when one is frightened or is exposed to danger. So adrenaline will increase the rate of the heartbeat to prepare the body for vigorous activities such as escape or to fight and overcome the danger that has been presented.